Hello class, back again talking about chapter 10. So without further ado, let me get back to that. I'm on objective number 2 if you're following along with objectives. And this is on I'm still talking about the organizational effects of hormones. So one question is, are hormones causing us to have particular preferences if you are XX versus XY? So does early estrogen or testosterone affect childhood play? Well, it looks like both hormones and socialization are going to play a huge role in childhood play. This picture that I found on the web was a parent asking, why is my little girl playing with boy toys? And that just shows you the socialization effect. We are afraid of children playing with non-gender typical toys. And so we, a lot of times discourage them from that. Well, I mean, I wouldn't, but I think a lot of parents do. At any rate, so you can imagine that socialization plays a role. If this girl is being told, here, why don't you play with these dolls instead, and then being rewarded for playing with dolls. Well, it turns out anyway that there is some effect of biology, because if you take an XX pregnancy and give the child testosterone, you don't do that, but it happens sometimes, usually through a tumor to the adrenal gland. So this is a girl who gets testosterone. She will develop masculine play preferences. Now, it doesn't mean that she's going to turn into a super tomboy or anything like that, but she just has more masculine play preferences than girls who don't get the testosterone. It's definitely a multiplier effect with socialization, because if kids show an initial preference, a lot of times parents will just kind of go whole hog and start pushing that preference. So if a girl shows a preference for dolls, and the parents will start buying dolls, and then all of a sudden you definitely have a very gender typed individual. Okay, I think that's less true now than it was in the past, but it definitely was true in the past. Okay, well, let's talk about the activating effects of sex hormones. These are things that, remember, are temporary effects. If you take out the testes in boys, what you will find is that sexual behavior reliably declines. They will stop getting erections. They will stop being interested in sex. Correspondingly, the amount of testosterone seems to be involved in sex drive or sex seeking. And this is true in both men and women. High testosterone are going to seek more partners. For women, definitely there's more effect of estrogen and progesterone, and we see that with the monthly cycle and sexual behavior. But testosterone is also going to heavily contribute to sexual behavior in women as well. Okay. Well, there is an area of the brain called the medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus, and it responds to sex hormones in the blood. And so the activity in this area increases quite a bit during sex. And the main neurotransmitter there is dopamine. So let's talk about what happens during the sex act with dopamine. In that medial preoptic area, or MPOA, you get, dopamine is the dominant neurotransmitter there. In small amounts, it's going to activate two kinds of dopamine receptors, D1 and D5. And those seem to lead to kind of receptive or readiness behaviors for sex. So you get erection in males and receptive postures in females, and vaginal lubrication, stuff like that in female. And then in higher amounts, you start to get activation of the less sensitive D2 receptors. You need more dopamine to get them active. And that seems to be the cause of orgasm in both men and women. So, so dopamine seems to be the big driver of sexual behavior, not surprising, right? Because there's addictive behavior and eating and all this other stuff. Why not sex? All the things we want. So serotonin is going to generally inhibit dopamine activity in the brain, and that's why serotonin has sexual side effects. Serotonin reuptake inhibitors have sexual side effects, because if you increase the serotonin in order to decrease depression is why you're taking it. it also sometimes makes it hard to have an orgasm. A lot of times you can get excited but not have an orgasm. Okay. So remember that the activating effects of sexual hormones basically are the things that require the hormone to be there at the time, and that's going to be menstrual cycle in women, sexual interest in general, and then pair bonding, and we'll talk about those now. So the monthly cycle in women, it usually goes in we usually talk about it in 3 phases. It's pre-ovulation, ovulation, and post-ovulation. So those are my 1, 2, 3 here. After you get your period, you're pre-ovulatory. At that time, your pituitary will start to release FSH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and that is going to cause one of the follicles in your ovary to start developing. Now, inside the follicle is the egg or the ovum. And that is going to start releasing estrogen as it starts developing. So it starts developing and starts releasing estrogen. Now, as it develops, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It releases more and more estrogen. That comes to our ovulatory phase. When estrogen reaches very high levels, the pituitary now sends a big surge of FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and another hormone called luteinizing hormone. Well, that surge, that LH surge, luteinizing surge, causes the follicle to break open and then release the egg. Now the egg goes into the fallopian tube. That's where sperm can swim up and get the egg fertilized, okay? Now there's this broken follicle. We changed the name of it. Now it's called the corpus luteum, just means yellow body because it is yellow in color. It releases progesterone. And so now that it's broken open, all this progesterone comes out from the inside, and it is going to build up the uterus with blood and tissue to get ready for a fertilized egg to come down to the uterus and implant itself. If there's no fertilization, that extra blood and tissue is cast off, and that's what your period is, or menstruation. Okay, let's take a look. So initially, in pre-ovulatory is everything before this line. You've got the follicle that's growing. It's releasing more estrogen, so estrogen is going up. And then right at ovulation is when we get this surge of FSH and LH, and that is going to cause the follicle to break open. Here you see it breaking open. Here's the egg freeing up. Now it's called the corpus luteum. Estrogen has gone down, but progesterone goes way up, which in the lowest level of the uterus there, you see it builds up the uterine lining, and eventually it will be cast off if you do not have a fertilized egg. Okay, so one question is, how does the pill work, or how does any kind of a hormonal birth control work? Well, they're either going to use estrogen and progesterone or some type of combination of those to suppress FSH. So what happens is you don't get a follicle developing. So you never get the start of it. And they also can thicken the mucus of the cervix and makes it harder for sperm to pass through in the first place. And that's going to be true of the shot. It's going to be true of the implant. It's going to be true of any pill you take. Even a hormonal IUD will work the same way. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the activating effects of testosterone. Testosterone is correlated with sex drive in both men and women, doesn't matter which. Higher levels of testosterone, you're less likely to be in a committed relationship, and you're more likely to cheat if you are in a relationship. But what's unclear about this is the cause and effect, because we see certain kinds of things increasing testosterone. For example, being single tends to increase testosterone compared to being in a long-term relationship. So did you break up with that relationship because your testosterone was going up? Or was it that you broke up and then your testosterone went up? So it's really hard to tell what's the cause and effect there. But we do see testosterone, high testosterone being associated with more sexual partners. What about estrogen? Well, around ovulation, estrogen is high because the follicle's been putting off a lot of estrogen. And during that time, women tend to initiate a lot of sexual activity. They like pornography more, and they start to prefer a more masculine looking man, one with a full beard or big brow ridges or whatever. if they do prefer men. If they prefer women, they start to prefer more masculine appearing women as well. So activating effects of oxytocin, another hormone, comes from the pituitary. It's involved in contractions. So for example, contractions at birth that we're going to allow you to push out the baby, milk letdown that allows milk to be contracted into the breast, orgasm involves contractions. All of these are oxytocin based. When oxytocin is high, we tend to get a calm and relaxed and sort of trusting feeling. That may be involved in the pair bonding. It could be involved in the mother-infant bond, but it may be involved also in the partner bond. And so after orgasm, you may feel a sense of calming and trusting and bonding with the person that you're with. Okay, after the baby is born, you tend to see prolactin and oxytocin both going up. We do see prolactin and oxytocin are going to be important, very important for lactation, because prolactin, remember the lact is milk. And so that's going to be involved in milk production. And then the oxytocin is going to have the contractions to let down the milk. It's going to be important for lactation. You can't do it otherwise. So you say, well, is this really important for bonding? And do you have to have it for bonding? Well, no, because what we see is that adoptive parents who do not have the lactation, men who largely do not have the lactation, are still able to bond with babies. So it doesn't seem like it's necessary, but again, it does seem like at least oxytocin is involved in bonding. Okay, well, we will get on to objective 3 next time. You guys have a great day, and thanks for listening. Appreciate it.